Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dr. Boz Show. It's Tuesday night, and we are talking about those folks, I might be one of them, who in the past has been stuck on a certain substance that seems to be hijacking my ability to stay clean on keto. This subject is something I learned about at the low carb Boca, and I do have to give a special thanks for the lecture given by the Psychiatry Refined. There was a ton I learned in that lecture, and you're going to hear about it tonight. A little bit more in how I've seen it in patients, and maybe a couple stories from myself. So personally, the story that I'm thinking of, I was in my early 20s. I was in residency, and that non-dairy creamer, you know, the one that has really good flavors, many options in the aisle, that it doesn't need to be refrigerated. So I don't know why they keep it in the fridge section of the grocery store. But I was obsessed. Like, I can remember being on call. I had been up all night. I needed coffee. But if the coffee didn't have this substance in it, it was like I was obsessed. I would leave the hospital, go grab this creamer, and then come back and finish my job. And I can remember how difficult it was to get off of it. While listening to this lecture at Low Carb Boca, I had this moment where I thought, that's exactly what happened. All right, we're going to explain that later tonight. Until then, we're going to do a couple of the traditions here on the Dr. Boz Show. First of all, we're saying hello to all of those tuning in, and we are going to check my numbers. Once again, hello, Becky Nolan from Birmingham. I have to say that the Becky won the she was the one who won the bid and got the consult today for the auction that I held last month, raising money for the kids' school, and it was the best consult. I had such fun learning about her stories, helping her out with a few places she was stuck. And as I was preparing this lecture, I kept thinking, oh, I hope she tunes in for this, because she probably has similar troubles. Here's my numbers for tonight. 2.3 on ketones, glucose is 65. I had a few of you tune in and were very adamant about how are my numbers so good? How are my numbers so good? And I will tell you that it's not always this way. I have fasted for 2.5 days. I have not eaten since Sunday. So this time I did a little better job of preparing this curve for you. So I have a reflection. The last couple of weeks we have talked about using the My Keto Mojo dashboard to keep track of things. And this was my numbers just a little bit ago. And let me show you that when I hover over these numbers for the last week, you'll see that my ketones here were 1.7 and 79. But if you go back to here, my ketones were 0.2. That was at the beginning of my fast. So I don't always have great ketones, and this is part of being metabolically flexible. Now you will notice, and I know this is only a couple of numbers of glucose, but my glucose is usually pretty good. I think when I watch folks improve their numbers or get a handle on their numbers. Oopsie, I didn't mean to do that. Those ketones rise pretty nicely when I fast, and when I add glucose into those numbers, it's pretty stable. Even today, it's the end of the day. I'm close to 60 hours of fasting, and my glucose is 65, which is good. But those ketones really don't spike until the last few hours of this fast. And we talked about today in my local support group. And if you are in the Tampa area or ever want to visit our support group, it's free. It's on Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock at the Pin Chasers here at 4809 North Armenia Avenue. I do it every week, and it's a way to just give back to the community here in Tampa, as well as answer questions for people that, I need a community too. I need to be in a support group too. So they've been the kind recipients of hearing my lecture for KetoCon that I'm preparing for. It's not done yet, but it's closer, and we're getting less confusion each time I try to explain this very complicated subject of what's the real bad cholesterol, and how can I explain that in 40 minutes or less without confusing my audience. Yeah, stay tuned. If you are in the Austin area, I will be looking to hang out. I actually invited the gal. Let's see. Did I set that up right? Oh, I might not have set that up. Hold on here. Hang tight. I need to go to. Yeah, that's what I thought happened. Don't give up on me here. I just got to click this button. Oh, there we go. Okay, almost perfectly set up. I didn't want to land here. I wanted to land over here. That I am working towards getting my lecture ready for KetoCon. That is April 21st through the 23rd. And I am looking forward to meeting several of you that are coming. The gal that I talked to today on the consult was not able to come, but I did want her to hear that Keto-Palooza is something I've said yes to in the fall. October 6th through the 8th. I don't know if I get to say all the way to the 8th because my youngest son has hopefully a date to what's it called? Homecoming. It's their homecoming celebration. So I didn't want to miss the last one of those in my little family. But I will be there probably the 5th, 6th, and 7th. And that is in Louisville. I've never been there. So I was looking at the website for Keto-Palooza. Not only is it in October and it's in Louisville, but the gal who runs it, Autumn, is just a wonderful woman. And she's predicting 300 people will be there. So if you're looking for an intimate event, or maybe we can give her some success by showing up to her event and helping her support what she's doing. She's got a great story. She really is helpful to so many that are looking at the psychology behind how is the ketogenic diet, how can it be sabotaged? Speaking of which, let's get to our slides tonight and see how well I can do on delivering this. I will say it is a process that I hope to explain to you. And as I share these slides, I am going to try to start with a little bit of confusion, so hang in there. And we are going to end with, again, what I've seen in patients and some explanations for why it's so hard to get off of a couple of substances that are really popular on the ketogenic diet, but are also a big part of why many people get stalled out. Let's see if any of you connect with this, so I'll be really looking forward to what you think of this lecture. I thought it was fascinating, and I went down a rabbit hole learning about this. So let's start with a little bit of confusion. So here is something that I have seen, but the psychiatrist that gave the lecture at low carb Boca. Oh, you know what I didn't set up? I didn't set up my drink for the night. Let me quick do that. So I'll do that while I explain of a patient that he presented, and I thought of several of them that I have had in similar situations. But this patient of his began eating flour when she was 16 years old. She would do a couple of unique things. I'm just putting a little pucker up into my bubble water. Again, I don't need to raise my ketones, but I really should fast till tomorrow. But I don't know if I'm going to do that. Cheers. So the patient began eating flour when she was 16 years old, and she recalls being depressed but could not pinpoint specific thoughts that led her to eat flour, except that when she ate the flour, she had such pleasure, such joy roll over her body that it was the antidote for feeling low. She began to associate feeling relaxed and soothed with any time she ate flour. So when this psychiatrist was giving the lecture, he went on to talk about how he has really served patients with a eating disorder for many years. And when he first came across this strange obsession of flour-based foods that seemed to cause a strange reaction, he did a little digging, and he talked about the symptoms of what happens when excessive consumption of dairy or wheat, and we're going to explain why both of those are important for this situation, to the point where they exclude foods from other groups. Patients have this intense obsession. The thoughts of the food are intrusive, and they will go to extreme lengths, like you're sleep deprived, the coffee's in front of you, but you're going to get in your car, drive down the street, be late for rounds because you just have to have the creamer. That's crazy. I shouldn't have done that. When they consume these substances, and again, their basis is in both dairy and wheat. We're going to explain that in just a minute. The feeling of sedation or calm happens when they eat them. There's also strange things like self-injury, rage, and being spacey when they withdraw from those substances, and when they eat them to comfort. They can have strange behaviors. So when I first started looking into this, I will tell you I was not a believer. I said, no, this can't be right. The toxin that this psychiatrist was talking about is an X-orphan. So the definition of an X-orphan is it actually looks a lot like morphine, but X-orphans, I don't know if you can see this cursor here, are peptides that activate the opioid receptors. They are derived from foods such as wheat or milk, and it happens inside the digestion. So just to give you a little bit of a sense of how extensively this has been searched, I went into one of the search engines, just typed in X-orphans, and was able to come up with a lot of research that has been done in looking at what they're learning. Just kind of studying some of these, the effects of the acute and chronic admission of these X-orphans on behavior and learning. That one's tumor diagnosis. That was radiopharmacology of tumor infusions. Gluten X-orphans, again, those specifically that are coming from wheat, and how the structure changes as, or how it mimics and looks like an opioid, like morphine. This one's the one about schizophrenia, delayed learning. I don't know about the cockroaches. Asymptomatic celiac disease, the number of people who really find themselves obsessed with wheat products. They go through withdrawals when they give them up, and yet when we do the blood test to look for the antibodies for celiac, they're not present. Significant food-derived opiate peptides. That's exactly what we're going to talk about here. I could go on. There's about 30 more of these, but I'm going to go back to our slides and talk about what exactly is happening inside our gut. So let's first describe what this picture is of. So this section in the gray is your gut lumen. And what happens in your gut lumen is that's where the food comes. The food comes in, the bolus comes down this gray area, so it's coming down here, and it will exit this way. As the food is inside this lumen, several enzymes come into play. Once those enzymes do what they're supposed to do, the food should be absorbed in through these different cells, endothelial cells, that really help us sort and improve our food. All right, so let's take away my scribbles here and show you what we've got. All right, so if you absorb gluten, the first thing that happens when you bring in those particles of flour, your pancreas enzymes see that. They bind with the gluten, and that structure is then called a gliade orphan. I just want you to notice those last, I actually think they're, in some spellings you can have an E on the end of it. So gliade orphan. Once those two compounds, if you would, the enzyme plus the gluten, are together, they interact inside our gut with that peptide, or DPP4 peptide. That gliadorphin then becomes amino acids, and our body uses that as the amino acids it needs to survive. So here's what happens when your DPP4 is either blocked or insufficient for the foods you're eating. So that gluten comes in just like before. It binds with the pancreatic enzyme. It then is a merge of this gliadorphin, and it attempts to do what it would typically do, which is interact with that DPP4. It can't do that, and therefore it is absorbed unchanged into your circulatory system. What happens next is it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it acts like morphine. It fits into these opiate receptors that act like morphine. And if you've ever had people say, when I take oxycodone, I feel calm. And other people say, when I take it, I get agitated. That extreme change in behavior matches the symptoms of what happens when this gliadorphin or this morphine lookalike is in our system. The patient that the psychiatrist described would take up to 4 pounds of flour a day, soak it in water, and then drink the milk off the top of it. That's where the gluten really is in that substance. It doesn't end there, though. Let's look at another substance. So this is casein. Casein comes from milk or cheese. And again, it's like any of our food substances. It needs a pancreatic enzyme to help break it down and get ready for absorption. As soon as the casein and that pancreatic enzyme come together, it's called casomorphin. Again, looking carefully at this root word, that it looks a lot like morphine. The structures are very similar. What's supposed to happen is it should bind with your DPP4 enzyme, and that should break it down and turn it into some amino acids. Harmless amino acids. You go in and use them for the nutrients that your body's after. And just like with the gluten struggles, casein in excess, your pancreatic enzyme is supposed to bind with it. It will turn into this casomorphine, and then it needs to interact with that DPP4. But if you don't have enough DPP4, if you're eating excessive amounts of cheese or other forms of casein or milk or cream, the casomorphin comes into the circulation, and just like the other analog, the other lookalike of morphine, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and binds to these opiate receptors in your brain. And when you ask patients, what were you feeling as you were coming off of your morphine? Well, we have learned that these opiates and gluten have similar effects. We give them plenty of credit for the asymptomatic celiac disease, but I like this quote. Oopsie, didn't mean to go backwards there. Sorry. Hang tight. So I like this quote. Oops, I'm going to have to take this down. There we go. I'll play it again. There we go. These compounds, meaning the opioid lookalikes, have proven opioid effects and could mask the deleterious effects of gluten protein on the gastrointestinal lining and function. Here we describe, meaning here is in this paper that I just covered up, a putative mechanism explaining how gluten could mask its own toxicity by exorphins that are produced through the gluten protein digestion. So as this process continued, you can the psychiatrist, up until a couple of years ago, was able to measure this in his patients. And he could see that some people, one of the best stories he talked about was some of his autistic patients and how if they were obsessed with certain foods. And again, these two foods continue to haunt those with a decline in mental function. And that was an obsession with bread and an obsession with casein or cheese-based substances that come from cow's milk. So excessive consumption of dairy or wheat to the point where they will not quit eating. Almost every other food is, to the point where they will quit eating almost every other food. They are obsessed with the food. And when those happen, he would measure the byproducts of the casomorphin and find it there when the milk products were the dairy products were their obsession. And if that was the gliadin, you'd find when wheat products were their obsession, they would find the gliadomorphin present. The next layer of struggles, though, was that, well, of course, not everybody that eats bread has this. Not everybody that eats milk has this. But when that DPP4 enzyme was either saturated, meaning you ate so much that you could not break down that combined unit of the pancreatic enzyme plus the casein, or the pancreatic enzyme plus the gluten, that's when these morphine-like structures would get into circulation. And the patients would have an intense obsession that wouldn't stop. They would think about the food until you gave it to them. And I have patients who say, I tried giving up cheese. I had dreams about it. It was like a 4-day withdrawal that I couldn't think about anything else. It was somewhere at the 10th day where I finally was able to stop obsessing over it. And if you look at the timeline for coming off of morphine, that's very similar timeline. Intrusive thoughts circle over and over again in their mind. And when they do consume it, these intense feelings of sedation, of calm after eating it happen, especially for those that have eaten it to obsession. So I think back and look at food addiction and how it can be thought of as, that's not me. And then you start to take a history of what kind of ketogenic diet are you on? And we look at people who start out with a pretty liberal, I would call this a liberal ketogenic diet, where they have 50 to 100 carbs. And I would say that most of them will hit a plateau pretty early in their weight loss story. They'll also have a difficulty of hitting the Dr. Boz ratios that we reach for to reduce inflammation and really to fight mental health or seizure disorders or even cancer. If we're trying to help that chemotherapy work better, if we're trying to help those folks either get through a surgery with the least amount of inflammation, we're going to tee them up for a really good Dr. Boz ratio. And although they often start out eating a lot of fat, I mean, more fat than people are usually comfortable with, there becomes a time where the kinds of fat, if they are having struggles with not necessarily gluten, but definitely the dairy, they plateau and they don't feel well. They feel inflamed. And they'll say, I don't know, I gave up cheese. It was really hard those 10 days, but now I feel better. Of note, goat's cheese, for which my husband does not like, but I love, is not a dairy product. You can still have goat cheese. So if you say, I did great, but I have left back on, they'll find their way back to these dairy products. So again, many people are able to graduate to the moderate ketogenic diet. But when I get people who are off of these two products pretty stably, I mean, the gluten, again, we're going to show you where that might be coming into some people's, on a ketogenic diet, gluten isn't usually the gluten goes away pretty easily. It's the dairy that we usually are fighting with them to say, I think you should try to give this up for a while. And when they have an incredible emotional reaction, like the longing of food, it's like a grieving process. That's more than just withdrawal from not eating that food. There is something more going on. And it wasn't until this lecture where I said, oh, that's exactly what's happening to several of them. So I point out a couple things. This whey protein, you say, well, that's just, from egg whites, right? Yeah, unless you're buying the really cheap ones. And then they add casein to it. They even add gluten to some of them. So be really careful when you're looking at those supplements. They're often not just pure whey. So be sure to read the labels on that. But of course, the obsession with ice cream, even if ice cream has your sugar substitutes, or I have people that have frozen cream with a little bit of cacao powder or cinnamon. but it's an obsession. They really, 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 really like it. Some of the cheeses that are made from cow's milk, and then this is what got me. This is what got me when I was in my early 20s. Is a it wasn't this exact creamer, but it was in the little the little canisters, and usually the hospital had plenty of it. But if the hospital did not have it, I went a little nuts for it. I really couldn't believe how much I wanted that substance. And when this doctor was explaining that they would soak the what is a non-dairy creamer? Well, it's usually soaked flour milk that doesn't go bad. It can hang out in the hospital forever. They add a little bit of sweetness, but I would feel calm after I took it. And I'm like, this is not normal. Of course, I didn't say that the first week. I said that long after I gave up that gluten. So a couple of little things that I looked up after, this is part of my deep dive. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about Ozempic. And Ozempic is a GLP-1 inhibitor. So if you take something that inactivates GLP-1, that is what Ozempic does. It GLP-1 agonist. No, so it activates a GLP-1. If you look at DPP-4 inhibitors, so they shut off with what DPP-4 does. DPP-4, that purple enzyme that was breaking things down, it usually breaks down your GLP-1, which is why GLP-1 usually lasts a little while in your system. The injections that last a month or that last a week are this slow trickle of delivering this GLP-1 agonist that last a long time in their body. And those are the drugs that are like Ozempic, like Wegovy. There's another one that I was trying to think of that are all out there for weight loss. And there are some DPP-4 inhibitors that are being used in conjunction with your Ozempics. It's now a combo drug that have even more weight loss with them, but also have some setbacks. Anyway, it does still increase your insulin secretion and suppresses glucagon. Those are other places that it does work. When I get to teaching about what your gut is doing and what is happening with people who are obsessively eating food, and those that are eating a little bit more food than they should because it's a little comforting, there is a striking difference between those that are obsessing over food, that are eating it as you do not get between them and their casein-based food when they're in a bad mood. They will just eat until they feel better. And as I have interviewed lots of people and helped lots of them kind of sort where should you focus, that focus is often, it's like completely blocked. They are blinded when the body is craving for a morphine-like derivative. So this was slides I made a while ago, just kind of pointing out a couple things that I think are worth noting. That alcohol does change that mucosal barrier function, that your mucosa at your gut when you have alcohol. Not only does it decrease your brain's ability to say no to foods when it should, your inhibition is less. It also changes that slime layer that was in the last picture. Ghrelin being one of the things that increases our hunger. The gut-brain axis is what these specific hormones are. It's not going to let me write on that. Looking at the foods, there it is writing, the types of chemistry that your body makes to suppress your appetite. Cholecystokinin is a very big one. This has a lot to do with your DPP-4s, that same purple chemical. Leptin, again, peptide YY, oxyntomodulin, and then your cytokines. All are ways that you decrease appetite. It's just telling you again. When you look at the types of chemistry that increase it. Ghrelin's the biggest one I wanted to point out. This was another one of the cannabinoids that give people the munchies after they when they smoke marijuana. That is a very chemical-induced hunger. All right, so what is the purpose of all that? Is when I am looking at patients who are struggling with their weight loss, when they're saying, Doc, I just can't seem to lose any more weight. And then you hear stories about how much they're obsessed with not only getting a food, but in a place where it is way beyond what is normal for a craving for food. That I push to say, when I ask people to give up cheese, I do a little bit of warning to say, when you strikingly withdraw morphine from somebody, they have withdrawal symptoms. And there have been patients where we took that cheese, we took all of their milk products, and we dropped it instantly. It was not the best way to do that. When I look at people who are truly, well, I really believe they're addicted to this byproduct of their bodies not breaking down that cheese effectively, whether that gut is that DPP4 is just not working, whether it's saturated, I don't know. I actually don't care. What I know better than to do is to slam down their withdrawal because they will have lack of sleep. They will have obsessions. They will have almost a paranoia. And when I was doing that search in the literature, the number of times schizophrenia came up was what was a little alarming. Like, oh, these patients might have been telling me the truth, that they really are crazy for this cheese. And I might not have given them enough credit until I read about this. Now, I don't know if I was that crazy over cheese, but I've been close a couple days. I just want people to think about this, that there is a chemical reason why bodies would be obsessed over a type of food. And it may be that it is acting as a morphine-like substance in your brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It is very much studied and measured. I just would be the first to say I had never looked into that until this doctor gave that lecture. So I want to say thank you again for that and the deep dive of distracting me for an inappropriate number of hours studying that. So let me hop back over to our questions for the day. So if you haven't been typing in questions, I see that we have a few folks who have added their questions. And I will get to those in just a second. I do have a couple of other announcements before I do that too. Number one, next week is parent-teacher conferences. So next week, I am going to shoot cleanup for the questions that have gone unanswered on the live shows for the last several weeks. I'll get through a few of them and then I'll run out of time. So if you type in your question and it was copied into the documents that we've kept over the weeks, I will be shooting cleanup for that next week. And then anybody who writes in live to that show, I'll try to get through those as well. We're going to try to collect a few slides. A few of the questions that were asked are great questions. I just really need a little help with the slides in order to answer them. So if you didn't get your questions answered over the last few weeks, you'll want to tune in next week because it's going to be a good show. It's going to be lots of different topics, but I think some of these questions, boy, people have asked me a lot of times, and I just need a great way of answering it that everybody understands. All right, so let's see what has made the docket today. So going here. All right, Lisa writes in and said, how long does it take to break a dairy addiction? Well, I will tell you that some of the key things that I coach people on when it comes to addiction of a dairy is, one of the things is, like I just said, it is a gradual decrease that is better than slamming it all the way down. And by gradual, I don't mean instead of 6 blocks of cheese, you only have 5 in a day. I mean, there is a certain level where reversing that is difficult to do in steps. You need to really get it down to a reasonable level. But you can't believe the number who've said, I can give up everything except the cream in my coffee. It is so comforting to me. These are the words, and I've said these words, so I'm like, oh, I might have done this. It is so comforting to me to have that cream in my coffee. Now, I'll tell you, I am much more clear-headed when I don't do cream in my coffee. That I now still think of it as, sometimes I'll do it as a treat, but that's not, 3 times a month might be a lot to put cream in my coffee. But when I do, boy, I feel really good. I love it. So it makes me think, I don't want to do the blood test to me. I don't want to know, but I probably should stay away from that. So when I set up a plan for somebody to do that, I do ask, the first history is, how much, have you ever had symptoms of withdrawal when you took that away in the past? And the answer is often, yes, they have. If that's the case, slamming it all the way to 0, it's not like, the case he talks about with the woman who soaked the flour and then drank the wheat milk or whatever off of the soaked flour, that's a rare case. And maybe it's just because I take care of ketogenic patients that I see obsessions with cheese. They take a ketogenic diet, and yes, it's cheese and more cheese and more cheese and more cheese. And although that's great for Friday night pizza once a month, it shouldn't be what you're doing every day. And if it is, you're probably not losing weight. You're probably not getting Dr. Boz ratios. And when they say, I tried going without it and I felt withdrawal, I do a 50%, cut it by 50% over 4 days, cut it by 50% again over 4 days. It's a similar protocol that I use when I'm taking care of heroin addicts. As we cut it by 50%, cut it by 50%. There we use Suboxone and a few other things. But I did think it was very interesting when that psychiatrist was talking about what other medications he uses to help people with withdrawal. And one of them is naltrexone, oral naltrexone. Again, it's an opiate blocker. So even if they have the opiate, the opiate can't bind to it. You've probably all heard of the naltrexone. Oh, that's not the right. Naltrexone's the longer acting one. There's a shorter acting one that they use in a pen. It's not an EpiPen, but it acts like an EpiPen. They use it in every emergency setting where if they are not breathing, they give this medication that I just can't think of right now. It'll come to me and I'll be like, yes, that's what I'm saying. But it's an analog for the, it just pulls that opiate receptor. Oh, Narcan. Thank you very much, Patty. They give them Narcan, and the Narcan removes the opioid effect. So that half-life is short. Naltrexone's half-life does the same thing, it completely protects the receptor, but it stays in circulation and is present for hours. In fact, there's an injection of it that lasts a month, which is actually really helpful. But one of the best ways when he's had them addicted to these opiate type receptors is he'll put them on oral naltrexone with really good response. And I always thought it was interesting that some people when you look at the studies for naltrexone use in food addiction, like some of them would be great and other ones they just didn't have any separation at all. So if you're really struggling with it, naltrexone's cheap. For 30 pills, I think it's under $40 cash pay. So your doctor, tell them you're food addicted, and it's off label, but it's got indications for that. Actually, it might be FDA approved now because they have it in several of the combination drugs they use for weight loss. Is that it does work that way. All right, Sherry said, did you say goat dairy is okay? Yeah, goat dairy was okay. I thought that was very interesting because I love it. My husband does not like it. So yes, you can have, it's called something. My husband always calls it goat cheese. And so if it has another name, I'm not going to think of it. All right, let's go to William's question. He says, been using pea strips to try and get my ketone production up. How long and what kind of calories per day should I be doing? Well, I don't like to use the C word here on this channel, meaning calories really are not the best way to chase anybody's improved ketogenic journey. Calories are deceptive on how they are used in each person's chemistry set. So here on my channel and in the books that I use and in the classes that I teach, so many of the patients that come to me for help. Oh, feta is the name of the cheese. Thank you very much. That is it. So many of the patients that come to my and ask for my help are insulin resistant. They've been overweight for many years. They've got a tummy, and the calorie consumption is not the metric you need to be using, at least until the chemistry is completely fixed. And by fixed, I mean also things like what we're talking about tonight, which is these strange addictions that are present even if the patient is not aware of them. So when I look at the number of things you should be counting carbohydrates. That's the C word I like to use. So total carbohydrates is what we measure on here. I like patients to keep less than 20 total carbohydrates. There is an awesome free app out there called Cronometer that I highly recommend if you haven't counted carbs in the past. Counting carbs, I don't care if you're an insulin-dependent diabetic that I'm teaching or if you're a newbie to keto. Counting carbohydrates is very stressful for people at first because they can't believe how carbs are everywhere. They're everywhere. William, I would strongly encourage that you go to your phone, go to Cronometer, download the Cronometer app, and count carbohydrates, not calories. So I have my patients turn off the calorie count. I don't want to see it. I don't want them to see it. I don't want them looking at it. I really want them focused on how many carbohydrates, keeping it less than 20. The other major step that I see patients make a mistake with early on is they are fearful of eating that much fat. And it's for many reasons that they're fearful, but especially at the beginning, they should be eating much more fat than they're usually comfortable with. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, Lisa says, how long does it take on keto to see the fingerprint on the shin go down? Oh, that's a great question. Just today, we were talking about in my support group at the Pin Chasers. Oh, got a hair there. About when I'm doing well, like during my fast every week, and how even on my fast, I will see that my ketones don't want to come up for the first 24 hours, or they come up to meet a demand. If I go for a workout, if I go to the sauna, I'll see them burst. But I'll get up in the morning and they really leveled out to just 0.5, 0.6. Yesterday morning was 0.2. When I look at, when I know I've not been good, when I've had either a too large of an eating window, meaning eating first thing in the morning and then not getting home until after 9 o'clock and trying to eat a little something then, that's too large of an eating window for me. And when I break that rule several days in a row, the first thing that comes back is that thumbprint in my shin. It comes from years of having been insulin resistant, having had that swelling that I didn't know how to make go away. I knew if I went for a really long run, which I don't like to do, it would go away. But now I can see that every time that I stay in a solid ketogenic state, or at least have really metabolically flexing into ketosis most days of the week, the shin print is 0. But even after being keto since 2015, I still have that come back when I cheat for too many days in a row. Boom, comes right back. So when you're looking for it to go away, when I pull people into the 21 day and I'm really intense for 21 days, I'll hear at the end of the 21 days that some people will say, for the first time since they've been checking that thumbprint, it's gone. Other people, it is they have to keep their Dr. Boz ratio like morning, noon, and night less than 40 for 7 consecutive days before it goes away. And really, what I don't like doing those sprints just for the. You can do it for the experiment to prove to yourself that you can get it to go away, but it will likely come back if you're not in a stable place of being able to find an eating pattern that you can keep within that window. The danger of a sprint change, like fasting for 5 days or fasting for 3 days, but they're not in ketosis, is it changes the chemistry for a short while, but who cares? You did a good job for 3 days. You proved to yourself you can. I think that's worthy of the experiment. But the real answer is to not let the swelling come back. So in people who are severely insulin resistant, I've seen that that thumbprint. They really couldn't get a grasp on how well, how to keep that consistent eating window, to 4 hours or less. It has to be during daylight. No snitching at night. And that doesn't mean you do good one night a week. You got to do that for 8 weeks in a row. And that's the kind of persistent improvement that we see to get that swelling out of your legs. But the best part is, when that's there, your brain works amazing. It's such a correlation to improved brain function and no swelling in your leg on that shin thumbprint. It's a great little test too. Very much correlates to blood pressure too. All right, next question. Aloha 22, a routine person on the show. Do you have any YouTube lectures on how to understand if you have a fatty liver, symptoms, etc.? Is there a test or blood work that indicates the prevalence or degree of this disease? So fatty liver can be studied by some enzymes that come out of the liver. These enzymes should be nice and low, and I'm talking your AST, ALT. I like them below 20. Below 25 is even pretty good. When they are above 25, they're still normal. So the blood test says, oh, you're fine. But when they get to be in the 40 range, 45 range, it says, your liver is, you're asking your liver to do too much. You are taxing it to do too much. And that is one of the first signals that we see with a fatty liver. Because fatty livers are reversible, but it comes with first lowering the blood sugars and then lowering the blood triglycerides. And all of that is at the same time you're lowering your insulin levels. So when I look at people with a fatty liver, we can often, do the ultimate test. We can do an ultrasound. We can see that even some have had biopsies of their liver done to look how fatty is their liver. I would never do that unless they can't figure it out. But stay away from biopsying your liver at all costs. The lab tests are a pretty assertive, aggressive way, and a pretty clear way to see that liver is consistently overtaxed. It's overburdened. But one of my favorite ways to look at how inflamed is their liver, how difficult is their liver in the world of functioning. Because if you're waiting to get all the way to fatty liver, I wouldn't do that. I would reverse it long before then. So what does it look like on your way to a fatty liver? Well, at the end of a 36-hour fast, your blood sugars are still high. And by high, I mean above 90. That above at a 72-hour fast, I still have some patients that have blood sugars above 100. One of my favorite lectures is an hour-long lecture at the end of Consistently Keto that talks about what happened when we studied people who were obese and we didn't let them eat for a month. And we were looking at liver enzymes and glucose and triglycerides and ketones and weight loss and norepinephrine. And it was an incredible look at how their bodies were functioning. And what it taught me was, first of all, if you're insulin resistant, you should not go from a normal ketogenic or normal diet to fasting. All you're doing is you are skipping the step that you will need to make the kind of brain repair, the kind of autophagy that you're looking for. But also, those people with a fatty liver, those people who are insulin resistant, their blood sugars took forever. I think it was into the third or fourth week before it dropped below 90. Maybe it was below 80. Anyway, it was, they didn't eat anything for 3 weeks. It's a great lecture. I do a lot better job of explaining that than I'm doing here. But it truly was a disconnect between, they said, oh, I've denied myself food for 3 days. And then you look at their blood sugar and you're like, you don't get it. Your liver is still emptying the glucose. And I think that's one of the most important signs that patients should be looking at to say, reversing fatty liver, yes, we all want you to reverse fatty liver. But so many patients are just a quarter turn off from a fatty liver. They are a high insulin liver. They have too many triglycerides in their circulation. They have too much stored sugar called glycogen throughout. And when they fast, they can go, again, up to 3 weeks before it dips below that into the 80s, into the even it should be into the 60s, about 65, to get your liver empty. So one of the measuring tools, and I explained this in that lecture, was when you get a blood sugar of 65, you can be guaranteed that your liver is empty. And so when you say, how long does it take Aloha 22 to fast to get a blood sugar of 65? Now, don't be a knucklehead and just do that, because some people are taking medications that will do things, so talk to your doctor. But that's a wonderful way that I look at how fatty is their liver. How long did it take to get to 65? Okay, let me see. Let's go to the next question. Is MCT oil in coffee okay? Sure. When I'm guiding patients on which things to put in their coffee, I want them to graduate to none. That yes, MCT oil helps your body make ketones. It is a great medium chain fat that really does spin into ketones. Your liver makes them, so your mitochondria in your liver are in shape for making them when you've been taking MCT oil. And then it provides ketones, just like drinking them, it provides ketones to the body. And if the body can use it, it will. If it doesn't need it, it puts it in your urine. So it's okay, but when I'm pushing people to reverse problems, there's a step on the keto continuum. It says, you got to give that up. Because if you are still having that when you're on keto continuum number 6 and you just cannot give up that cream. Again, that's one of the reasons I did this lecture tonight, to say, consider that you might be addicted to it. But number 2 is, they are calories. And we do need you to get the calories into a window. That's what is going to be the next metabolic stress for most of my patients. And then when that window, their 4 or 5 hour window, whatever they're living at, is not doing it, I need them to slide it towards sunrise, so that the closer to sunrise it is, the better their metabolism. So then their body goes a long time before, while they're sleeping, their sugar gradually rises. Yes. All right. Well, that is getting to the end of this. And again, those of you that still have questions on here, I will do them next week. I do have one thing that I would ask you guys to do. So I will have my team put this in the show notes. Maybe I can copy it and paste it for you. Let's put it in there for them. And that is to link to our free download for 50 facts about fat. Again, I've had lots of you write in saying, I don't know how to begin. I don't know if I can do this. I want to watch some YouTube videos that are going to answer my questions. So I made this book. It's an ebook, but in each of the questions, I link it to one of the YouTube videos that answers the most common questions that people have. So it's free. Once you download it, you can share it with other people that are looking for answers to the ketogenic diet, and you're not really interested in, of course, you can check out one of our books, you can check out the online course, but if you're looking for a free resource that I think is really good for beginners, start with that, and we'll see if that answers their questions and hopefully interest them in some of the education we do here on the show every Tuesday, coming to you with reversing medical problems with